Welcome to this late night explainer, where we're going to venture into a dark room in a Japanese temple to confront a 100-year-old wooden doll with a genuinely terrifying secret. Now, if you're watching this in the dark, you might want to turn on a light, because the story we are about to uncover has haunted a family and an entire nation for over a century.
I want you to imagine a completely non-living object that terrorized a family for 20 whole years. A doll whose hair inexplicably grows like a real child's and whose mouth is slowly opening to reveal actual teeth. It sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? But this object is very real, and it currently sits inside a wooden box in a temple in Japan.
All right, part 1, the doll in the dark. Let's step back in time to uncover how a simple gift became a vessel for unspeakable dread. But seriously, be warned, this is not an explainer you want to experience alone.
So our tragic history begins in 1918. A 17-year-old named Ikichi bought an incredibly realistic, really expensive Ichimatsu doll at an exhibition in Sapporo for his little sister's birthday. This wasn't just some cheap toy, it was an exquisite piece of craftsmanship. It had short hair cut to the jawline, traditional Japanese clothing, and a remarkably calm, almost eerily human-like face. Ikichi just knew it was the perfect gift.
The little girl instantly fell in love with it. She named the doll Okiku, and the two of them became completely inseparable. I mean, eating, playing, sleeping side by side. To this little girl, it wasn't just a toy, it was her entire world. She brushed its hair, bathed it, and literally never let it out of her sight.
But all that joy quickly turned to horror in 1919. The little girl, quite possibly struck by the rampant Spanish flu that was devastating the globe, fell violently ill. She suffered a severe fever and agonizing breathing difficulties. But despite her immense pain, she refused to let go of her beloved doll, and tragically, she took her last breath, still clutching it tightly to her chest.
The family was completely heartbroken. They just couldn't bear to bury the doll with her as they had originally planned, so instead they placed it in their kamidana. That's a sacred Japanese household altar used to pray for deceased loved ones. By placing the doll there, they intended to honor their daughter's memory, but they unknowingly opened a door to something deeply unsettling.
Which brings us to part 2. The haunting begins. Because it wasn't long before the grieving family started noticing impossible, terrifying changes happening right on that altar.
Ikichi was actually the first to realize with absolute dread that the wooden doll's short hair had inexplicably grown. It now reached all the way down to its jawline. Remember, we are talking about a non-living object made of wood. The sheer physical impossibility of what occurred next absolutely defied all logic.
Now, against all basic survival instincts to just throw the thing out, the family actually decided to cut its hair. Instead of getting rid of it, they took scissors to it, treating it as if it were a living being. And the doll seemingly responded to this intrusion.
From that day on, the family endured 20 years of psychological torment. We're talking dark nightmares of a screaming child, violent, unexplained knocking on their doors. The father even woke up one night to find the doll's glass eyes staring directly at him in his own bedroom. They were trapped in a state of constant fear, bringing in priests for blessings, yet entirely unable to destroy the doll because they fully believed their beloved daughter's soul was trapped inside.
Finally, in 1938, the exhausted family moved away to Sakhalin for work and surrendered the doll to the priests at Manji Temple in Japan, where it actually remains to this day. They warned the priests all about the growing hair and the dark events that plagued their home, just hoping the sacred grounds would finally bring them some peace.
Well, the priests noticed the growing hair too, but they only began trimming it annually as a ritual after one of the priests had a chilling dream. In his dream, a little girl stood before him and whispered, "My hair has grown long. Please cut it." The temple ultimately embraced the doll, and to this day, thousands of visitors flock there every single year to see this legendary artifact with their own eyes.
All right, it is time to turn on the lights for part 3, the scientific truth. Because as terrifying as the ghost story is, the physical evidence tells an entirely different and, frankly, incredibly compelling story of its own.
So, here's the crucial point. The phenomena that terrified this family for 2 decades actually have incredibly logical, material explanations. When we place the paranormal claims right next to historical and scientific realities, the whole mystery begins to unravel in a way that's honestly just as fascinating as the legend itself.
Back in 1918, making dolls with real human hair was actually cheaper than using synthetic materials. To save money, doll makers would fold a super long strand of real human hair into a U-shape, loop it right through 2 holes in the doll's wooden head, and secure it tightly inside with adhesive.
Now, over the course of a century, the internal glue holding those U-shaped loops has decayed. This causes the long strands to slowly slip out of one side, perfectly mimicking hair growth. Because the hair was never actually cut at the root, but rather looped, as that adhesive turns to dust, the sheer weight and gravity pull the strands downward, millimeter by millimeter.
Furthermore, the doll's head absorbs moisture and expands during Japan's rainy season, then shrinks back down in the dry heat. It's crafted from a porous mixture of sawdust and crushed shells. This incredible natural expansion and contraction literally acts like a slow-motion mechanical pump, pushing the loose hair further and further out of the scalp year after year.
And as for that terrifying open mouth and teeth, it's really just the old white putty on the doll's lips chipping away to reveal the dark structural material underneath. As the bright white coating degrades over 100 years, the dark gaps left behind create an eerie optical illusion. From a distance, in a dimly lit temple, it looks exactly like the doll is parting its lips to bare its teeth.
Now on to part 4, the uncanny valley. If science perfectly explains all the physical changes, what explains the 20 years of relentless terror the family experienced in their home?
The answer lies in the uncanny valley. It's that deep psychological dread you feel when an object appears almost but not perfectly human. Combine that with the family's immense, world-shattering grief over losing a child, and they became prime targets for their own terrified imaginations. They saw exactly what their grief and fear trained them to see.
Yet, there's a really beautiful twist here. In Japanese culture, there is a belief that once an object reaches 100 years of age, it actually gains a soul. It becomes worthy of profound reverence rather than fear. This deeply rooted cultural perspective shifts the whole narrative. The doll isn't a monster. It simply crossed a spiritual threshold of age and history.
Which means Okiku isn't some malevolent, cursed weapon like the infamous Annabelle. It's simply a treasured, century-old artifact deeply intertwined with a family's tragic loss. The temple priests treat it with the utmost respect, not because they fear it's going to attack them, but because it represents the enduring love and immense sorrow of a family from a century ago.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'll leave you with this final, spine-tingling thought for the night. We've explored the decaying glue, the expanding sawdust, and the very real psychology of a grieving family. But when you look closely at that calm, 100-year-old face, you kind of have to ask yourself, is it really all just science, or does a piece of that heartbroken little girl still reside in the wood? Sweet dreams.